What's good, everyone? Today is December 22nd of 2023. My name is Derek, and today we're going to talk about the news from December 19th, where Colorado removed Donald Trump from the Republican primary ballot. In this video, we focus on the numerology of Trump's ban back on December 19th. We'll be covering how this connects to Donald Trump, of course, also the current president, Joe Biden, as well as the 14th Amendment itself, which Colorado has cited in order to perform their action this week. We'll also see how it is actually numerically connected to the state of Colorado itself, as well as its governor, Jared Polis. Now, if you're new to this channel, we focus on numerology with a strong emphasis on the language of Gematria, or Gematria, as it's often pronounced. This expresses geometry within the language that we speak. Now, here you see the most basic English Gematria cipher, but it would be a little bit too obvious and very difficult to code everything in one cipher. So this brings us to the base 4, where the alphabetic order can either be reversed or reduced using the basic rules of numerology. And as we go, we'll also see a couple of large number ciphers, beginning with standard gematria, a denary cipher, which is identical to ancient Greek isopsephy, Hebrew gematria, and of course, Latin gematria, or Agrippa's key, which uses the classical Latin alphabet with more modern characters at the end. Another thing we'll be covering in this video is that one day after Donald Trump's news in Colorado, we got this news story that wrestler Hulk Hogan was baptized. And this is interesting because, kind of in the background, I've been doing research recently about the connection with Hulk Hogan, the Twin Towers, and the Big Boss Man, and how this all connects to not only September 11th, but also the January 6th Capitol incursion, which is the reason that Trump has been removed from the ballot. Now, in order to explain this, we need to understand that Hulk Hogan, back in the late 80s, was part of a tag team with fellow wrestler Macho Man Randy Savage called the Mega Powers. And at one of the first Survivor Series events back in 1988, the Mega Powers were the two last men standing in a Survivor Series match, which also featured a team called the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers were comprised of two very tall pro wrestlers, Akeem and the Big Boss Man. So what we'll talk about in this video as we go on is how not only the death of Big Boss Man in 2004 is related to this story, but also the mock sacrifice of the Big Boss Man on pro wrestling's biggest stage, WrestleMania 15, back in 1999. Just as a quick example of this, the numbers here are pretty staggering. Measuring from the death of Boss Man, whose name sums to 106 in the reverse alphabetic order, to the January 6th Capitol event on 106, January 6th, was 16 years and 106 days. This is also 850 weeks. Exactly. And when he was the Big Boss Man, he was billed as being from Cobb County. And Cobb County has an 850. So strong links there. And again, we'll get to that as we go. But first, let's talk about this story with Donald Trump being removed with the 14th Amendment. 14 is always an interesting number in Gematria because in the alphabetic order, or really any of these ciphers, it's the first number to sum to itself in the language of Gematria. So here we see the number 14 equals 104. Now, in numerology, the 0 is oftenly ignored, so this represents the number 14. You also get the same digits 41 in reduction, and it just so happens that the Big Boss Man died at the age of 41. He was a member of the Twin Towers tag team, and wouldn't you know that the Twin Towers in 2001 were destroyed on a date with 41 numerology. So here we have the 14th Amendment being exercised. Well, if you measure from the death of the Big Boss Man, September 22nd of 2004, to the baptism of Hulk Hogan, you get exactly 1,004 weeks. So not only does this represent the number 14, but we also get 19 years and 88 days to the date that the 14th Amendment was exercised. And 1988 was the year that the Twin Towers were toppled by the mega powers, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. Notice how this phrase that's quoted in the headline, insurrectionist ban. Whenever you see quotes in a headline, there's a very good chance that there's relevant gematria underneath that. Using the S exception of gematria, called single reduction on my website, this is the same as full reduction, but the S is worth 10 because it's the 19th letter. 1 plus 9 sums to 10. So insurrectionist ban also sums to 104, like 14. And this was carried out by the Colorado Supreme Court, which equals 104, also with the S exception. And what I thought was interesting is that this ruling has now been put on hold until the date January 4th, written 1/4 on the calendar. In fact, the 14th prime number is 43. And we'll talk a lot about prime numbers in this video. And notice the Supreme Court ruling there in Colorado, 4-3. Using trigonal gematria, which maintains the alphabetic order, but uses the associated triangular numbers, this cipher here in the top right of your screen if you want to pause that. The word insurrection sums to 1414. And if we look at Election Day coming up in 2024, we find that January 6th occurred exactly a span of 1,400 days before Election Day. This all happened in the state of Colorado, which was admitted to the Union on August 1st, which was 140 days before this news story, again representing the number 14. Colorado is also 147 years old, matching the gematria of President of the United States. The 14th Amendment was passed in 1868, just 3 years after the end of the Civil War. And it was due to the Civil War and potential uprisings after it that this amendment was passed. Now, the Civil War ended in the year 1865. This month, December of 2023, is 1,865 months after the amendment was passed. So this is all in response to the January 6th United States Capitol. Well, I won't use the word attack on this channel. I think, a riot or something like that. An aggressive assembly of sorts. This attack or event happened in the year 2021, and this is the next big number in this story. Because using the standard alphabetic order, the phrase 14th Amendment has gematria of 221, just like the year 2021. On the date of this news, December 19th, Colorado Governor Jared Polis was 221 days after his birthday. Inauguration Day is 221 days after the birthday of Donald Trump. And Election Day in 2024 falls 221 days before Donald Trump's birthday. Now, this is a pretty significant number because in standard gematria, President of the United States, or did I spell this right? President of the United States of America. So, little flub there. This sums to 2201, the same digits as the year 2021. Also, with capital letters, the phrase POTUS equals 221. But what really brings this all together is that if you measure from the date of the September 11th attacks in 2001 to the date of this news story, with the end date included, this is 22 years and 100 days. And no doubt, the September 11th attacks are a massive component of this numerical riddle. We're going to talk about Lunation 1260 later on in this video, as Election Day in 2024 occurs during Brown Lunation number 1260. And in Latin Gematria, September 11th equals 1260. Now, in Latin Gematria, the name Donald equals 119, which are the same three digits in 911. And the number 911 is the 156th prime number. Election Day 24 falls 156 years and 119 days after the passage of the 14th Amendment. When the Supreme Court appeal occurs on January 4th or 1/4, that'll be both 156 weeks after January 6th and 156 days after Colorado's anniversary. In fact, President Donald Trump, measuring from his date of birth to the date of birth of the governor of Colorado, is 10,560 days. Also, this news story is 15 weeks and 6 days before the next Great American Eclipse. This eclipse, the second of two Great American Eclipses, which stamp an X over the United States of America. And the number 156 is the Hebrew gematria of the word used for eclipse. And eclipses always occur 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases apart. This applies in English as well. Eclipse the sun, 156. Meanwhile, the 911th prime number is also 7109, and Jared Polis took office as governor 719 days after Trump became the president. Now, this might seem a little obscure, but the word Freemasonry has gematria of 719, and we'll talk about how the numerology of Freemasonry is super synced up with this story. But first, I want to talk about another 911 number, and this brings us to the number 1109, which is how the 11th of September is written in most parts of the world. Now, the number 1109 is the 186th prime number. And this connects us to the two flights that destroyed the World Trade Center. First, it was Flight 11, and then Flight 175. And if you add these two flight numbers together, you get a sum of 186. The January 6th Capitol riot was 11,860 weeks exactly after the opening of the United States Capitol building. Correction, construction for the United States Capitol. We don't actually have an opening date. All we have is this construction date. And yeah, that riot, 11,860 weeks later. And remember, America declared its independence on the 186th day of a leap year. January 6th falls 186 days after Independence Day. This news story from Tuesday fell 1,806 days after Jared Polis became the governor of Colorado. Current President Joe Biden was born exactly 186 weeks before Donald Trump. And if you measure instead to Jared Polis's birthday, notice the number 11,861, which is 186, surrounded by ones. Now, if you instead look at the last 4 digits of this measurement, you get 1861, which is the year that the Civil War began. And Civil War equals 119, just like Donald. And you know they would love it, these mainstream media outlets, if Americans actually caused a civil war over all of this hoopla with our government. Now, on Election Day next year, Donald Trump will be exactly 1,048 sidereal months old. Now, a sidereal month measures the time it takes for the moon to orbit the Earth in relation to the stars. It's a little over 27 days. And Donald Trump, born on the date of a total lunar eclipse. In ordinal, Donald J. Trump equals 148. Now, as I've been discussing quite frequently on this channel this year, 2023 is the Skull and Bones year. Order 322, or the Skull and Bones Secret Society, which uses the number 322 on its emblem, is headquartered at Yale University, which turned 322 years old in 2023. And in ordinal, Skull and Crossbones equals 223. With capital letters taken into account, 14 and Donald both have gematria of 223. The capital letter ciphers still maintain the alphabetic order, but either mix or add capital letters into the chart. Also in reverse satanic, Donald equals 322, whereas Biden equals 322 in squares. And wouldn't you know, Donald Trump's ban from the Colorado ballot occurred 322 days before Election Day. The Skull and Bones University, or society I should say, is also known as the Brotherhood of Death. And you have to appreciate how the Brotherhood of Death has matching gematria with Colorado Supreme Court, 14, Donald, and Donald John Trump. In a couple of alternate methods, the Brotherhood of Death has matching 211 gematria with Yale University. This news story on the 19th fell a span of 2 months and 11 days after Yale's special 322nd anniversary. It was also exactly 2 years and 11 months after Joe Biden took office. The name Donald Trump equals 211 with capital letters. And that's another significant prime number, the 47th. President, 47, just like Trump, 47 and 470. Republican, Democrat, White House, government, authority, all 47 in reduction. Now, the Brotherhood of Death, right? The word death has gematria of 38. And Yale University equals 83. This brings us to the state of Colorado, which was the 38th state admitted to the Union. In gematria, both 83 and 38 are the values of Colorado. And when Colorado made its ruling on Donald Trump, it was exactly 83 months after he became the president. These numbers also found in Colorado's age, 383 on the date of the story. The 38th prime number is also coded in, 163. Measuring from the date that the 14th Amendment was passed, July 9th to December 19th, is 163 days. Trump was removed from the Republican ballot, which equals 163, exactly 1,063 days after Joe Biden took office. And I point that out because it's also 152 weeks. Joe Biden equals 152 in reverse. And the state of Colorado celebrates its anniversary on the date leaving 152 days in the year. Earlier this year, Joe Biden fell down at an Air Force graduation ceremony in Colorado. And I did a video on this, all about how it was connected to the planet Mercury, as well as the Phoenix Mercury's Brittany Griner. Joe Biden was exactly 81 years and 1 month old for this news story. That's the 141st prime number, which is also the number of days since Colorado's anniversary. You'll also see in Joe Biden's age is Donald Trump's birthday, June 14th or 6/14. So we see some skull and bones connections with all of this. And I think it's safe to assume that Skull and Bones is a Masonic fraternity. Notice how the phrase Masonic has 4 matching values with Skull and Bones Society and Skull and Crossbones. These are pretty strong links right here. Another number connected to Skull and Crossbones is 444. Well, on the date of this news, Trump was 4,044 weeks and 4 days old. The word Masonic also equals 444. And that's in Sumerian Gematria. Now, Sumerian Gematria is very simple. It's just the alphabetic order times 6. A very significant number connected to the study of time. So this means, in ordinal, Masonic equals 74. And Tuesday's news had numerology of 74. These are also the values of killing, Jesus, cross, Messiah, gospel, and parables. And no doubt, Donald Trump is a major Jesus figure. Look no further than Latin Gematria, where Donald John Trump is 589, the reverse value of Jesus, 985. And certainly many people on the right consider Trump their savior. Now, Colorado is very significant to the code of Freemasonry. You'll notice that the city of Denver sits along the 105th meridian, as well as the 39th parallel. In base gematria, the word masonry sums to both 105 and 39. In reduction, masonry sums to 33, which is thought to be the highest degree of masonry. Well, Denver is home to area code 303, and in Latin reduction, both Denver and Colorado equal 33. The name Donald Trump is very Masonic as well. His full name sums to the 165th prime number. And Trump was born on the 165th day of the year. Well, in the alphabetic order, the word insurrection equals 165. Colorado equals 165 with capital letters. This is an important number to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Freemasonry 165, just like Scottish Rite in ordinal. And remember, 165 is half of 330. Right? Another big 33. In reverse, Scottish Rite is 159. So is Donald Trump, insurrection, President, Colorado. But also, the World Trade Center and September 11th also have 159 gematria. And this will bring us to this whole big boss man mock sacrifice in a minute. This story was also 2,311 days after the first Great American Eclipse. That's the square number value of Freemasonry. All right, so for the next part of this video, and again, we're going long today, I thought about giving this a super stream moniker for the video, but I think we'll save that for when we talk about several different topics, right? So, to get this started, let's talk about the birth of WrestleMania first. Correction. First, let's talk about this story with Hulk Hogan getting baptized, because this will provide the link to what we're talking about. Now, the destruction of the World Trade Center was very connected to the numerology of Jesus Christ, and in order to see this, we just need to look at the number 11. Which was the shape of the World Trade Center, 110 meters tall, or stories tall, 110-meter antenna, destroyed on the 11th, in the 11th state. Flight 11 was there. Osama bin Laden, 110 in Gematria. This is also a big Skull and Bones number. And George W. Bush was a member of Skull and Bones, even born in New Haven, Connecticut. Now, in reduction gematria, the name Jesus equals 11. If you instead use the alphabetic order, Jesus equals 74, as we pointed out earlier. And New York City and the World Trade Center sit right there on the 74th Western Meridian. So a perfect place on the globe for this event. So Hulk Hogan back in 1988 defeated the Twin Towers, and I wanted you to think about the number 88 in relation to Hulk Hogan. His initials HH. This is the 8th letter, 88. And this is a day after the Trump ban. In ordinal Trump equals 88. The Twin Towers tag team comprised of the Big Boss Man and Akeem, the African Dream. Well, isn't it interesting that if you measure from the birthday of the Big Boss Man to the birthday of Akeem, you get a span of 9 months and 11 days. Flights 11 and 175 destroyed the Twin Towers. These two men were also born 1,175 days apart. And if you measure from the Big Boss Man's date of birth in 1963 to the year 2001 when the World Trade Center was destroyed, we find that Ray Traylor was 2,001 weeks old. We also have to appreciate that Fox News published this story at 434 because those are the same 3 digits found in the Latin gematria of Hulk Hogan. 344. Now, I try not to talk about this too often because it's kind of always, it's not always pointing to the big riddle, but in this case, it was overwhelming. The gematria of this headline blew me away. Notice how this phrase, total surrender and dedication to Jesus, which is quoted in the subheadline, this phrase has gematria of 516 in the reverse order. In satanic gematria, Twin Towers equals 516. The satanic gematria method is completely centered around 666. Not the most important cipher, but a big one nonetheless. When the Big Boss Man died in 2004, Hulk Hogan was exactly 51 years and 6 weeks old. Let's look at the other quoted phrase, greatest day of my life. In the alphabetic order, this sums to 216. Hulk Hogan's real name, Terry Bollea, also has capital gematria of 216. During the 9/11 attacks, the Big Boss Man was a span of 2,001 weeks and 6 days old. And when Boss Man died, he was exactly a span of 2,160 weeks old. He also died 20 months and 16 days before another pro wrestler named Earthquake. Now, I'm not going to touch on Earthquake too many times, but he's an important piece of this riddle as well. Hulk Hogan defeated Earthquake in Philadelphia in 1990 at SummerSlam that year. And, I don't want to dive too deep into this, but it's connected to the Loma Prieta earthquake from the year 89. Earthquake, just like the Big Boss Man, met an early death in 2006. Hulk Hogan's tag team partner on the Mega Powers was Macho Man Randy Savage, and Macho Man also died at a young age, 58, back in the year 2011. Notice how Macho Man Randy Savage has the same gematria as World Trade Center. When Macho Man died, he was 21,370 days old. The number 2137 is the 322nd prime number, our skull and bones number. The World Trade Center sums to 322 with capital letters. And Randy Savage was 58 years old when he died. This syncs up with the gematria of his full name, Randall Mario Poffo 508. An important number to 9/11 as well. But check this out. On the date of the 9/11 attacks, towers 1, 2, and 7 were destroyed. 127. Well, measuring from Macho Man's death to Hogan's baptism is exactly 12 years and 7 months. And if you take the entire gematria of this headline, notice how it sums to 1270 in the alphabetic order. You can't make this stuff up. The exact number found when measuring to Savage's death. And we know there's a strong connection here because in Latin gematria, this headline also sums to 7140, which is the 119th triangular number. Another reference to 9/11. Furthermore, this headline also sums to 9010, which is, of course, just one off of 9011. Don't forget the rule of Colel, which technically says we can add or subtract 1 from the gematria value. With the S exception, this whole headline sums to 577. And on the date of the 9/11 attacks, Hulk Hogan was exactly 577 months old. This entire headline also has gematria of 1400. And remember, it was the 14th Amendment that was executed for Donald Trump. And this all happened exactly 1,004 weeks after the death of the Big Boss Man. This gematria was also 3,503, which is a lot like 353. Trump was banned on the 353rd day of the year. The nickname Boss Man equals 353, just like the word cross. Macho Man was 3,053 weeks old exactly when he died. When Trump was banned in Colorado, Hulk Hogan was the 512th prime number of weeks old, 3671. That's the 512th prime number. And 512 jumped out because 512 is the birthday of the governor of Colorado. But check out the Big Boss Man's age when he died. He was exactly 512 lunar phases old. A lunar phase, also called a synodic month, measuring the time from full moon to full moon. The number 33 is also significant here, as we saw with Denver, Colorado, home to the 303 area code. Well, in Latin gematria, Boss Man equals 303. And consider how 33 has matching gematria with ritual human sacrifice, which also sums to 9/11, by the way. When the Boss Man was hung at WrestleMania, his mock public sacrifice, that was 330 days after his birthday. And Trump was banned on the ballot 33 weeks exactly after Boss Man's birthday. And this mock sacrifice even happened in the year 1999. Well, 1999 is the 303rd prime number, right? And think about this in connection to the crucifixion code. Crucifixion of Jesus Christ equals 303. Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, 303. So if you ever wondered why most people believe he was 33 at the crucifixion in the year 33 AD, well, it all harkens back to gematria. Now, the year 1999 also has this upside-down 666 in it. And on the date of Boss Man's public sacrifice, notice how Hulk Hogan was 16,666 days old. Now, when Trump was banned in Colorado on December 19th, this was 130 days after Hulk Hogan's birthday. This is another number that stands out because the Big Boss Man was born exactly 130 sidereal months after Hulk Hogan. And in Gematria, Boss Man's full name sums to 130. In fact, you also get a 103 in reduction. When he was hung at WrestleMania, it was on a date with 130 numerology. And this is also the ordinal value of human sacrifice, as well as skull and bones. Again, this all connected to the skull and bones code. Bossman's full name also has matching gematria with the number 13, 347. The Brotherhood of Death, also 347. Trump was banned 347 days after the anniversary of the January 6th Capitol incident. Sacrifice, also 347 in Hebrew. So no question, it's just hilarious that Hulk Hogan, who has been a lifelong Christian, he's always talked about how he was saved at a young age, how he's, he strayed from God, but then came back later in life. Getting baptized right after this Trump ban is so wild in connection to this whole riddle. So, with this out of the way, let's talk a little bit more about WrestleMania, Hulk Hogan, and even Mr. T. Wrestling fans who are viewing may recall that Mr. T was the partner of Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 1. And this letter T is very significant to the occult, as the letter T is the shape of a cross. Jesus dead on the cross. T, the 20th letter, just like the word cross, 20. Now, if you look at Hulk Hogan, we see that during his wrestling days, and even to this very day, he's almost always seen wearing a cross around his neck. Again, a strong follower of Jesus. And isn't it interesting that the name Hulk Hogan has matching gematria with Jesus Christ in multiple ciphers? But his full name, Terry Gene Bollea, has matching 74 gematria with Christianity, Jesus Christ, Jesus, and cross. This brings us to the first ever WrestleMania, which was held in the city of New York, where almost all of the WWF's major events were held back in that decade, at Madison Square Garden in New York. And don't think it's a coincidence that this is the same city just a couple miles away from where the World Trade Center was destroyed in 2001. Again, Madison Square Garden, right there on the 74th meridian, just like the World Trade Center. And WrestleMania 1, check the date that this was held on. March 31st or 3/31 of 1985. Well, in Latin gematria, God's Son equals 331, whereas Jesus equals 985. This event also had numerology of 119. And a lot of Christians truly believe that September 11th was the real date that Jesus Christ was born. March 31st also leaves 275 days in the year, digits found in the Latin value of Jesus Christ. And Hulk Hogan, he used to come out to the song Real American, which used to be totally one of my favorite songs as a kid. And in that same cipher, Real American equals 275. The first WrestleMania fell on a date with 20 numerology. And again, this is the gematria of cross. The 20th letter is a T, and Hogan teamed with Mr. T at this event. Mr. T was born on the 142nd day of the year, whereas Hogan's birthday leaves 142 days in the year. This is the reverse value of Christian. Mr. T also with matching birth numerology with Hulk Hogan 97. We'll talk more about this number later. Hulk Hogan was born a span of 9 months and 11 days before Mr. T's birthday. And remember, we mentioned this earlier. The two Twin Towers tag team members born 9 months, 11 days apart. WrestleMania 1 also had matching numerology with the World Trade Center. So as I mentioned earlier, Hulk Hogan was 577 months old for the 9/11 attacks, exactly. This is the 106th prime number. In reduction, the World Trade Center equals 106. In Latin, Hogan equals 106. And this brings us back to the Boss Man. Boss Man equals 106. WrestleMania was 16 years, 164 days before 9/11. 164 is not only the gematria of Terry Jean Bollea, but also Terry Bollea in reverse, 164. In fact, if you add his stage name to his common name, Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, actually, we'll talk about this 1107 too, but Hulk Hogan, Terry Jean Bollea equals 1164. Boss Man equals 164. And in case you're wondering about this 1107, well, measuring from Boss Man's death to the 9/11 attacks was exactly 1107 days. Think about this in relation to September 11th. The 11th of September. September was the 7th month on the Roman calendar. Sep means 7. So 1107 is a lot like September 11th. When the Big Boss Man died, he did so on a date with 55 numerology. This was also the date leaving 100 days in the year. Hulk Hogan's theme song was Real American, which equals both 55 reduction and 100 ordinal. In reverse, Real American equals 224. Well, the Big Boss Man died exactly. Or I'm sorry, his mock sacrifice was 2 years and 24 weeks before 9/11. Both Jesus the Messiah and the Society of Jesus summed to 224. So there's actually a lot more with this. That connects to January 6th as well. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this public hanging done at a Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker in 1999. Now, I've seen a lot of wrestling. This is one of those eerie moments that kind of blurred the line between fantasy and reality. And if you see it, like, you know, the way he's raised and wiggling while he's hung, it's kind of sick, right? Well, check this out. In Satanic Gematria, which is probably relevant here given the fact that The Undertaker is involved, which had a lot of satanic imagery, especially at that time, Boss Man equals 328. Well, WrestleMania 15 in 1999 was held on March 28th, or 328. This date can also be written 28/3, like 283. With capital letters, WrestleMania 15 equals 283. And not only does the Big Boss Man's real name, Ray Washington Traylor, equal 283, but if you add Junior to his name, you also get a 283 reverse. 283 is the Latin gematria of 666. And again, this was in 1999, which has an upside down 666. The 666 was also found in Hogan's age on this date. Now, you'll notice that Traylor also died 2,083 weeks after President Herbert Hoover. Now, you may be thinking, wait a minute, we're going off the rails here. What the hell does Herbert Hoover have to do with this? Well, Herbert Hoover is pretty relevant to what's going on with the presidency right now, because the date that Hoover died is the same exact date that Kamala Harris was born, the current vice president. Herbert Hoover was the president when the Star-Spangled Banner became the national anthem in the United States. March 3rd of 31. And he was the president at that time. And Herbert Hoover has the same HH initials as Hulk Hogan. In Gematria, when you write out the Star-Spangled Banner, you get this value of 223, which represents the current year we're in, of course, 223. Wow, I'm also noticing the 344 in reverse. The very next part of my post is Hulk Hogan equals 344. And when The Undertaker hung the Boss Man, The Undertaker was 34 years and 4 days old. When you measure from the date that the Star-Spangled Banner became the national anthem, March 3rd of 1931, as we see right here, to the birthday of Ray Traylor, which was May 2nd of 1963, we get exactly 32 years and 2 months. Boom, the 322. What do you know? So here we have Undertaker hanging the Boss Man when really this is like hanging a flag, if you look at it through the eyes of the mystic or the occultic numerologist. So once again, we see this 33 connection with Boss Man 330 days after his birthday. The Star-Spangled Banner, signed on March 3rd or 3-3. If you measure from this date to the death of President Herbert Hoover, you get a really, really wild alignment. It was exactly 33 years and 33 weeks later that he died. Twin Towers equals 330, of course. The real Twin Towers destroyed 33 years after construction began. But we need to talk about how this is all linked up to the Skull and Crossbones Code. Measuring from the birthday of Hulk Hogan to the Big Boss Man gives us 507 weeks and 2 days. Well, 572 is the Latin value of skull and bones. Notice how Big Boss Man has matching gematria with Christian. Ray Traylor also matches Christianity like Big Boss Man. No surprise given what we've found so far with the Jesus code here. Jesus hung on the cross just like Boss Man hung on a rope. 61 is also the gematria of both Jesus and cross. And when we looked at this 283 earlier, this is the 61st prime number. Well, another 61 is skull and crossbones. And it's always interesting when you scan Big Boss Man's wiki page. And I see this photo everywhere. Every time they talk about the Big Boss Man, they show this photo. Not every time, but you know what I'm saying. And right there, you see the skull and bones on his t-shirt. That's all he has on his outfit there is a skull and crossbones. The other member of the Twin Towers tag team was Akeem. And before becoming Akeem, he was known as the One Man Gang. And check out his bandana there. See the skull? One Man Gang often wore the skull and crossbones on his shirt. Again, this guy, the other Twin Tower. Well, again, Bossman died at the age of 41, which was the numerology of the 9/11 attacks. And when he was hung at WrestleMania, that was also a date with 41 numerology. But notice how this is the value of Skull and Bones, which is a perfect match with this date numerology. 3/28 of 1999. All of these numbers here, the primary numerology numbers, all found in the Gematria of Skull and Bones. WrestleMania 15 was held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia sums to 223, just like the Star-Spangled Banner. Skull and Crossbones 223. Hulk Hogan was born on the 223rd day of the year. And Hulk Hogan equals 97, just like both Skull and Crossbones and Brotherhood of Death. Death also equals 97. 97, the 25th prime number. And death equals 25. Now this connection, the 97 and 25, brings us to the next part of this. Skull and Bones is headquartered at Yale University, which has ordinal gematria of 205. The Big Boss Man was born on the 2nd of May, or 205. With capital letters, his real name, Ray Traylor, equals 205. And he died 2005 days after WrestleMania 15, which sums to 205 ordinal. Think about the imagery here with Bossman being raised towards the ceiling with a noose. In order to perform this stunt, he had to have a harness on, which was tied to the ceiling. Well, less than 2 months later, another pro wrestler who was trying a very similar stunt, Owen Hart, died after falling from the rafters when he was supposed to be lowered with a rope. He had a fault with his safety harness and he fell all the way to the ring and died. Well, isn't it interesting that Bossman was born 2 years and 5 days before Owen Hart? This also brings us to the Macho Man, Randy Savage. The Macho Man died on the 20th of May, or 20/5. Ray Traylor's death is also connected to George W. Bush. Now, GW was a graduate of Skull and Bones, born in New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is located. He was also the 43rd president. Yale equals 43. His dad was another member of the Skull and Crossbones Society. Skull and Bones equals 41. And his dad was the 41st president. And I think he was also the 41st vice president. Don't quote me on that. So, notice how the Big Boss Man has matching 38 gematria with Hulk Hogan. Well, the 38th prime number is 163. This is the reverse value of George Bush. Bossman was born exactly 16 years, 300 days after George Bush. And when Traylor died, Bush was 58 years and 78 days old. Well, in reduction, George W. Bush equals 58, while George Walker Bush equals 78. So it's really wild how the gematria of George Bush is in his age when Traylor died on both of these dates and when he was born. So let's talk a little more about how Bossman's death is connected to the World Trade Center. First of all, Big Bossman has matching gematria with both the Twin Towers and World Trade Center. Bossman was born a span of 9 months and 11 days before his Twin Towers tag team partner, Akeem, or One Man Gang. Traylor was born 9 years and 11 months or 119 months before the first World Trade Center was opened in 1973. We see here April 4th of 73 is the big date for the inauguration of the Twin Towers. And he had the digits 911 in his age. When Bossman died, he was 15,119 days old. And when news of his death was first published in the media, it was a span of 1,109 days after September 11th. Again, Bossman was 2,001 weeks old for 9/11 in 2001. When you add his ring name to his common name, Big Bossman Ray Traylor equals 254, and 9/11 is the 254th day of the year. If you instead take his full name gematria, Ray Washington Traylor Jr. sums to 311. He died 3 years, 11 days after the 9/11 attacks. 311 is the 64th prime, like the Twin Towers. This is also a big skull and bones number, 64. Bossman died exactly 64 months after Owen Hart. When Bossman was hung at WrestleMania, the other Twin Tower, Akeem, was exactly 523 sidereal months old. And this is important. Hulk Hogan was also 52 years, 300 days when Earthquake died. But remember Owen Hart. Owen Hart died on 5/23 in the year 99, which is important because 523 is the 99th prime number. In fact, in satanic gematria, the name Donald Trump equals 523. Remember, a couple of WrestleManias were hosted at Donald Trump facilities in Atlantic City. Now, the number 99 is also the ordinal value of 13. And we need to talk about the number 13 with the Bossman because it's so huge. Once again, the Bossman was hung in the year 99, like 13. The word hung equals 99 with capital letters. And The Undertaker, who hung the Bossman, was born exactly 99 weeks after him. He was also born 606 weeks after Hulk Hogan. Bossman hung on a date with 130 numerology matching his name in multiple ciphers. Born exactly 130 sidereal months after Hogan. Skull and Bones human sacrifice. And again, his name has matching gematria with 13 and the Brotherhood of Death. I mentioned this quickly because I did talk about this earlier. Now, in reverse gematria, 13 equals 117. And this brings us back to the 11th of September, Sep meaning 7, 11-7. The name Ray Traylor equals 117. And he died 1,107 days after the 9/11 attacks. The mock sacrifice was carried out by The Undertaker. Undertaker equals 117. When The Undertaker defeated Hulk Hogan for the world title, which was also at Survivor Series, that was 117 months before 9/11. And check out how Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, sums to 1107. If you use his full name, Hulk Hogan Terry Gene Bollea has double gematria of 117 in reduction. This brings us to the January 6th capital incursion, which was 117 days before Traylor's birthday and 117 days after the anniversary of 9/11. In single reduction, the United States of America equals 117. So what do you say we wrap this video up, guys? We're an hour into it. We've gone past the normal super stream length. Thanks to everybody for watching. Let's get this over with. So as mentioned multiple times in this video, Hogan was exactly 577 months old on 9/11, which ties into the number 106, matching Hogan and the World Trade Center. The Star-Spangled Banner also has this 106 gematria. We've been talking about that. But this is the date of the next, quote, September 11th, January 6th. And, you can't help but wonder if the media hoped that there would be a lot of chaos and death on January 6th, even though there wasn't. Now, we did have the death of one protester. An officer died like the next day. I want to remind people, when you get hundreds of thousands of people in one place, a couple of them are going to die within the next week, just by statistics. So to call this, or compare this to 9/11 as Kamala Harris hilariously did, is quite ridiculous. So, Boss Man also equals 106, and he died 16 years and 106 days before January 6th. That's also exactly 850 weeks. And remember, the Boss Man was a corrections officer in Cobb County, Georgia. And Cobb County gives us that 850 value. Speaking of 850, Boss Man was born 8,850 weeks after construction on the United States Capitol began. Once again, the United States Capitol. Construction beginning in 93. And he was born 8,850 weeks later, and 885 is the Latin value of skull and crossbones. Trailer was born 116 months after Hogan's birthday. Hogan is 116 and upside down 9/11. The Capitol riot was 116 days before his birthday. The Capitol riot was also exactly 19 lunar years and 11 months after 9/11. And a lunar year is just 12 lunar months. A lunar month equivalent to a synodic month or a lunar phase. Boss Man's death was also connected to an eclipse that began Lunation 1006, for the record. Dead 156 days later. But there's more, of course. In Latin Gematria, Ray Traylor sums to 1212. And his full name also has 1212 Gematria in Fibonacci Gematria. Well, the January 6th event happened during Brown Lunation 1212. 1212 is also the value of skull and bones. Skull and Bones also has matching 140 Gematria with WrestleMania. Boss Man dead 14 years after the anniversary of the first WrestleMania. He was also born exactly 14 weeks after a solar eclipse from Saros 140. Seems a little random, but given that the Trump news from this week was exactly 1,004 weeks after he died, I don't know. We talked about this Star-Spangled Banner sync. Boss Man born exactly 32 years and 2 months after the Star-Spangled Banner became the national anthem. The first American flag was sewn in Philadelphia, which equals 223 like the Star-Spangled Banner. And this also connects to Akeem, his Twin Towers tag team partner, who was born 2,203 months after Independence Day, also 223 days after its anniversary. Boss Man, whose name equals 303, was born 303 days after Independence Day in 1962. Ray Traylor equals 1962 in standard Gematria. His death was also 303 days after the anniversary of Survivor Series when he lost to Hulk Hogan as a Twin Tower. Trailer has some interesting numerical connections to Herbert Hoover. Notice how Big Boss Man has matching gematria with Anthem, which also matches Ray Traylor. But let's wrap this up. And to do so, I want to talk about Election Day in 2024 and why this time I think something big for real might be happening. And when you see this, I think you might agree that there's some really strong coding with November of 2024 and how it connects to 9/11, Donald Trump, and this eclipse code. So first of all, let's jump to November 1st of 2024. November 1st is the very first day of Brown Lunation 1260. New moons have been counted since 1923. And November 1st starts 1260, okay? Now, November 30th is the last day of this moon, as the next day begins 1261. So all of November of 24 is Lunation 1260, okay? Now check this out. In Latin Gematria, September 11th equals 1260. When Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage defeated the Twin Towers at Survivor Series 1988, check out the date. November 24th, 1124. The Twin Towers destroyed by Hogan and the Mega Powers. And there's so much with this date. So let's dive in here. The entirety of November falls under this lunation. If you go from the first WrestleMania to this new moon, you get essentially the gematria of Hulk Hogan and Jesus Christ. Hulk Hogan 146. Jesus Christ 146. Hulk Hogan's full name, added to his stage name, has 1101 gematria, which is the date that this happens, 1101. And remember how September 11th was the date leaving 111 days in the year. And the Twin Towers were in New York, which equals 111. In Sumerian, World Trade Center sums to 1110. When the Big Boss Man died, he died during Brown Lunation 1011. And that was exactly 11,010 weeks after capital construction began back in the 18th century. And we know this is relevant because of how strong his ties are to January 6th, as we saw earlier. So, there's more here. On November 1st of 2024, the United States will be exactly 90,700 days old. Hulk Hogan equals 97, right? But if you include the end date, we get 90,701. Well, the number 971 is the 164th prime number, and we saw this earlier. Terry Jean Bollea, Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan, Terry Jean Bollea, and Boss Man all have 164 gematria. The Boss Man was even born 1,064 months after Herbert Hoover, who died in 1964. And I know this seems obscure, but the way these connect, it's not a coincidence. There's no way. Remember, the first WrestleMania was 164 days before September 11th. Also, we mentioned how Trump equals 88, and the eighth letter twice is HH, like Hulk Hogan and Herbert Hoover. Well, for Lunation 1260 on November 1st next year, Hogan will be 880 lunar phases and 28 days. Well, 28 is just two eighths. Hulk Hogan was born 88 lunar phases in 16 days after Donald Trump. 8 plus 8 is 16, right? 8, 8, 16, HH. On January 6th, Hulk Hogan was 808 months old. The Big Boss Man was born 88 years, 8 months after Herbert Hoover. And November 1st next year, Lunation 1260, is exactly 457 sidereal months after Hulk Hogan defeated Earthquake at the Philadelphia Spectrum in 1990. And Earthquake equals 457. I'm going to riff here a little bit at the end because there's one more thing I want to share. When it comes to earthquakes, I'm thinking about the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. Now remember, we've been talking about Survivor Series 1988, and then at SummerSlam of 1990 is when Hulk Hogan defeated Earthquake. And in between those 2 years, we had the Loma Prieta earthquake. Now, this was in the year 89. If we look at the Big Boss Man's birthday here, May 2nd of 63, we find that he was born on a date with primary numerology of 89. If you measure from his death to the death of Earthquake, John Tenta, June 7th of 2006, you get exactly 89 weeks. And remember, 89 sums to 623 in Latin. And 89 weeks is exactly 623 days. Also, when Macho Man Randy Savage died on May 20th of 2011, this was exactly 89 sidereal months after the Boss Man died. Randy Savage, dead of a heart attack, just like the Big Boss Man. Wow, I have so many notes on here. The 1990 SummerSlam event, if you measure to January 6th in 2021, you get 11,090 days before January 6th. Which makes me wonder if John Tenta's death is connected. Oh, wow, 175 months. Remember, Flight 175 was one of the two that struck the World Trade Center. So I don't want to get too haywire here. We've covered enough. I guess one thing I do want to mention is that SummerSlam was held in Philadelphia at the Spectrum. And we've been talking about this because when Boss Man was hung at WrestleMania 15, this was also in Philadelphia. And I don't know if it was the same arena. No, they got a new arena between then. So different arena, but same city. And Philadelphia, part of the whole Star-Spangled Banner riddle, you know, where Betsy Ross sewed the first flag. Now, the Betsy Ross house has an address of 239 Arch Street. And when Hulk Hogan defeated Earthquake on August 27th of 1990, it was the 239th day of the year. Now, if you measure between the 9/11 attacks and the January 6th attack, you get exactly 239 lunar phases. And 239 is the 52nd prime number. The big boss man, born on 5/2. 52. All right, guys. I think I'm going to cut it there. We've gone long enough. I'm going to go ahead and add some chapters to this video to make navigation in the future a little bit easier. But, you know, it's no secret. I grew up as a pro wrestling fan as a little kid. And when I was a teenager, I got roped in by the Attitude Era. So sometimes I go a little overboard when decoding these wrestling events. But with what I've revealed in this video, how can you deny the relevance of how professional wrestling ties into the big, giant terror attacks of our current day and age? It's just a little bit too wild. So, with that being said, we'll end it there. Thanks to everybody who are watching. Check the links down below if you want to find out more about how to support the work, a little bit more about Gematria, and some previous videos I've done, all down below. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya!